Welcome to Sophisticated Thinking. Why have you got me as the MC, Irma? Seriously, what were you thinking? Can I just acknowledge again, Chaim sort of left without us really appreciating what he just said. I think, Chaim, can you and your mum just come out here again? And I just think that was so wonderful. And well done, Mum. You should be very proud. And Chaim, I want to go to a karaoke bar with you and sing I Am Woman. I'm going to hold you to that, my friend. I'm going to hold you to that one. What fun. It's so great to look around the room and see so many leaders here today and so many tremendous women who are tackling gender inequality, and I'd just like to highlight one of them, and she's going to be horrendously embarrassed, but we've got Grant Stevens, the Police Commissioner, here, and next to him is the first female Deputy Police Commissioner, Linda Williams, who's a magnificent woman who has done such great things. She started in the police force when she was 17 years of age as a cadet, and I've spoken to Linda before, and when she first started in the police force, and she's not that old, she had to wear court shoes and she had to have her gun in her handbag. And it's so great to see her today in the same uniform as Grant. Well done, no more court shoes. Our next speaker is Scott Ashby. He is the Chief Executive of IPAA. He has held that job since 2013. He brings to the role more than 20 years of leadership experience and knowledge in primary industries, water management, natural resource management, environmental protection, as well as central agency experience. He leads IPAA at a time of key challenges in helping shape the future economy of our state, in particular our regions. The state government's strategic priority of premium food and wine from our clean environment drives IPAA's business. And if you ever need any help testing any of that food, give me a call. Scott is married with a 15-year-old daughter, so it gives him great pleasure to be here today and out of the house. Please welcome him to the stage.
Well, thank you, Amanda. Sorry, I'll just set this up. I actually would always much prefer to be at home than here. It's quite nerve-wracking to have to stand up here and think I'm the warm-up act for Julia Gillard. I'm on a hiding to nothing. And just before we started, I was sort of standing around thinking, how do I cope with my nerves? And there was an envelope on the seat. I don't know if everybody got this envelope, but I actually opened it. And I started laughing and I thought, is this a joke? Is this serious? And it reminded me of a very quick story that I'll let you in on. My mother-in-law worked for the Commonwealth Government in the 1960s. And as it happened, she was a young woman, a typist, and she met a young man and fell in love and wanted to get married. And her boss said to her, well, of course, you're going to have to resign. And she thought, she was a very strong-willed lady. She said, no way, and she fought it, and she won. And she was one of the first women in the public service that did not have to resign when you were married. But then she got pregnant, and they said to her, well, you're going to have to resign now. And she actually couldn't fight the system. What I want to talk to you today about is the system. And when I think of my mother-in-law and I think of that letter, I think, wow, how far have we come in that time? But before I talk about that, I'd like to pay my respects also to the Kaurna people, the traditional owners of the land that we're meeting on today. And we've had a number of presentations. I've been in another presentation this morning where we were welcome to country, and I think it's very important in Australia and South Australia that we continue to recognise the importance and the values of Indigenous people. I've been asked to talk to you about how we're tracking in the public service. And really, it's not surprising that the South Australian Government and gender equality are bound together in this state. We have a proud history of bold policy decisions for progressing gender equality and inclusive leadership. You know, as you all would know, we were the first state to allow women to vote. We were also the first state for women to have the right to stand in in Parliament. In fact, that was a first in the world. So we have been innovators in this space for a long time. And so often we tend to forget where we come from and the learnings that we can bring forward and think about, well, what else can we do? How do we keep travelling down this road? So for a modern public service, we're aiming to continue that journey, ensuring that women are equally represented in the leadership roles. And really, I don't have to tell you why this is important. You're all here. You've all voted with your feet. You know this is important. But I can say a couple of things before I give you some statistics about how we're travelling. Firstly, put simply, it's fair. That is a reason enough for us to pick this challenge up and run with it. But from a business perspective, it's really important. All of the research shows us that more women in leadership roles lead to greater productivity, better organisational financial performance, increased innovation, and enhanced organisational reputation. So why, when we're striving to be a modern public sector, why would we not pick up this challenge? Quite simply, having more women in leadership makes good business sense. And this is why the state government has launched the Gender Equality and Leadership Strategy from last year. So many of you would have been here last year at the first innings where they foolishly dressed me up in a cricket uniform, and I felt quite odd standing here advertising West End on the front of me, given that, of course, I promote the wine industry in my current role. But I digress. I think from a professional perspective for me, gender equality and leadership is good for my department, for the public sector, for the broader community and the state. And from a personal perspective, Amanda mentioned my daughter, I have a strong commitment to ensuring that anything that we do where women are afforded the same opportunities as men, that is intergenerational, that it's not short-term tokenism. And to ensure that we progress sustainable change in the organisations, people like Sandy Pitcher, who's here down on my left, and myself are members of the Chiefs for Gender Equity group, in the main a private sector organisation, but it's interesting to note that the public sector representatives there are often leading the way in the policy space and in the achievements they're making. I'm also a member of the Gender Equality and Leadership Steering Committee, which is internal within government. And it's in that later capacity that I'm going to speak to you today. Now, I want to share with you perhaps where we are in terms of gender equality and leadership in the public sector. Now, I'm going to use my technosphere here and see if this works. We'll get there sooner or later. No?
Need a woman to help.
I know. I do admit I'm from the generation when we have technosphere. No.
I think you've got it.
I think I've got it. No.
Oh my God.
These slides are not actually the greatest anyway, but... Oh. Sorry, I didn't push the idiot button. Okay, here we go. Here we are. Thank you. So here's the important information. 2003, a target was set in the South Australian Strategic Plan to achieve 50% representation of women in executive roles, including chief executive positions, by 2014. And Minister Maher already pointed out that we haven't got there quite yet. But when the target was set, it was only 28.2% of executives were female. And there has been significant progress since then. But over 14 years, 14 years, we've still not reached that equal representation. And that's despite 69% of public sector employees being women. But I guess it's not all bad news. As you can see, back in June 2016, we were sitting on 14% female executives. And last year, post the release of the strategy, things are accelerating. And in fact, it's increasing at 2.4%. That's better than the 1.3% average since 2003. So we are accelerating change, but I would argue not fast enough. And we need to sustain that momentum that the Gender Equality and Leadership Strategy has started. However, there is, a caution here. When you look at the South Australian Executive Service cohort, women remain considerably underrepresented. So June 2016, only 39.8, or as the diagram shows, 40% of senior decision makers were women. We're still accelerating in that space too, but we've got a long way to go in that regard. And I think statistics are one thing, but really that doesn't account for the variations within departments as well. The departments in the government are very, very diverse, and it seems that some agencies can achieve these targets simply by the ratio of employees, where other agencies have some very specific needs and challenges, and I'll talk about those in a minute. And of course, statistics only give you the numbers. They don't inform us about the experiences that women have, either in trying to attain leadership roles or once they're in those roles. Okay, so what do my statistics mean? We're 3% from reaching that target. And in real terms, if everything else remained the same, we'd need an additional 75 female executives across the entire public sector. Think about that. 75% out of 100,000 employees. One word came to my head when I was looking at these statistics: doable. Doable. That is an achievable target. We can do this. It's not something out there. 75 more people. However, I think we need to remove the barriers to career development. We need to make sure that we're mitigating unconscious bias about what makes a good leader. And we remove the barriers in the system that prevent women from advancing. This is not about fixing women, it's about fixing the systems that we work within and we work under and we are controlled by. Historically, we haven't afforded the same development opportunities to women as we have to men. Merit-based processes, so-called merit-based processes, often seem to favour a male schema, which means that decisions about legitimate leadership are routinely unconsciously biased, or sometimes even consciously biased, against women in favour of men. I'll give you just one example. The old ideas about needing to work full-time, 9 to 5, they have to be shed, and the government's made some statements about that in recent times. Of course, there's lots of other barriers I could talk about. Achieving gender equality is a complex challenge. We often talk about it as an issue, but we should talk about it as a challenge, as something that we feel competent with actually dealing with, not an issue which we see as problematic that we can't deal with. Yes, it's multifaceted, it's often subtle, and it's often difficult to tease apart because it's embedded in our organisational cultures. But it's not insurmountable, especially I think for South Australia, where our public service is a very close-knit organisation. We're innovative and we're pioneers in this space, going back to my earlier comments about history. But we all need to do this together. This cannot be done just by women. It has to involve men in the public sector as well. All people, men and women alike, in leadership positions, in positions of authority, need to drive this change because it's a cultural change. We need people, fair-minded, progressive people, to take up the lead, that people like the Under-Treasurer, David Reynolds, who you'll be hearing from in a minute, who's a real champion in this space. They need to follow the lead here, step up and work with other leaders to change the system so that it works for all of us. We often say changing the system is really difficult. You know, the machine says no, policy says no. We control that, we write the policies. So we have to take this challenge on. And to demonstrate the commitment, all of the chief executives in the Senior Management Council have signed a pledge here to take on the challenge of the target. It's interesting, in another forum that we held last year, people were asked whether or not women in leadership was a priority in their agencies. And believe it or not, 56% of the respondents believed it wasn't seen as a priority by management and executive. That is a concern. The comments were around things such as like the people in power and the old ways of thinking were barriers to change. So clearly we have a way to go in that space. SMC, which comprises of all the departmental chief executives, have made gender equality one of the 8 priorities for this year, and I would suggest going well beyond this year. we're committed to the achievement of 50-50. It doesn't always take huge policy changes to make a change. For example, in SMC, we had a family unfriendly start time of 8 o'clock in the morning, and that's now been moved to the afternoon. And you might think, well, so what? But it's simple, but it's very, very effective. Thinking about the pressure that put on people to get to that meeting, to leave the family kitchen table in the morning, etc., maybe getting the kids to school, off to school, whatever, was an unnecessary pressure, which now has changed the way some of us think about getting to SMC, I can tell you that. And I think we have to do things like that if we're going to expect you to also do things to pick up the challenge. Now, I'm not going to go through all of these key initiatives. Really, this slide is just there to say there are a lot of key initiatives happening across government. So I'm not going to talk about all of these, but one I do want to talk about is the reverse mentoring program, which Minister Maher mentioned earlier. And this is a real experiment in new approaches to addressing gender inequality. And it paired a male senior leader, the mentee, with a female leader or aspiring leader, the mentor, over a period of 3 months. Think about that. We're changing the roles there completely, where in fact the female mentor showed what it was like to be, perhaps in many instances, a junior manager trying to work their way up through the public service, and the more senior male manager seeing this through a different set of eyes and having conversations about what those challenges were. And it's really interesting, the result from that. The feedback was that this is a highly valuable process for men and women. 100% of the mentees, the males, said the program was a valuable use of their time. 100% of them said that they would be a stronger advocate for gender equality as a result of participating in the program. 80% of them said they'd taken specific actions in relation to gender equality as a result of participating in the program. And 100% of the mentees recommended that taking part in the program for other senior men in the public service was good. So clearly that experiment worked, and we're going to be rolling that out. The other program I do want to talk about, again, there's a whole series of dot points there of programs which are in the strategy at the moment that are being run with. But the one I do want to talk about is the new pilot initiative Empower program. So this is a sponsorship program where women are proactively supported through career progression. Many studies actually demonstrate that women find it more difficult than men to build networks and professional relationships due to differences in experience, interests and backgrounds. And this factor is frequently cited as being a significant barrier for the advancement of women's careers. So we're going to try to break that barrier down. We're piloting a program which will pair a high-performing woman, the protégé, with a sponsor from the executive group in order to advance that protégé's career. This is not just about mentoring, but this is actually about advocacy. So having a senior male person who can advocate for the career development of the other person. And over 9 to 12 months, that will take place. I'm pleased to announce that this will commence next week, and there'll be nominations being sought, I think, from the OPS. I think I'm correct in saying that. More information will be available on that program. And of course, all of the dot points you've been seeing up there, which I know you've been studying very, very closely, are projects that are being rolled out by the Office of the Public Sector. They'll continue training that explores such issues as unconscious bias and also trying to mitigate some of the challenges we have in our decision-making in our systems. So, I'm hopeful that with these initiatives, along with the ongoing education about the benefits of gender equality in leadership, that we can truly foster inclusive leadership in the South Australian public service. For gender initiatives to yield results and to be sustainable, they require constant championing, evaluation and forensic questioning of the outcomes, something that public service is actually very skilled at doing. When you think of our project management regimes, we should be applying the skills we have to the challenges that we face in this area. The Gender Equality and Leadership Steering Committee will be working hard to do this, and Senior Management Council will continue to consider how it can collectively support the achievement of the sector-wide targets. And from my perspective, sooner rather than later. Thank you everyone for attending today. It's an amazing audience. Thank you for exploring the gender agenda with us and for supporting the gender equality challenge. I'll leave you with this thought. Gender equality in leadership is achievable. It's not a target, although I've talked about targets and I've talked about results. It's a mindset. It's cultural change. That is what we have to bring about. And if we do that, we'll make a powerful, positive difference to the productivity, the effectiveness and the potential for innovation in the public sector and in South Australia. I thank you for your time. Thank you.